Johan Wilhelm Snellman was a Finnish statesman and philosopher who was born in Stockholm, Sweden in May 1806 and died in July 1881 in Kirkkonummi, a rural town some tens of kilometers to the west of Helsinki, the Finnish capital. His father, Christian Henrik Snellman, was a ship's captain. After Russia conquered Finland in 1808 and proclaimed Finland an autonomous or self-governing Grand Duchy in 1809, his family moved to Finland in 1813 to the central Ostrobothnian coastal town of Kokkola in western Finland, where his mother Maria Magdalena Snellman died already in 1814. In 1835, after academic work following the idealistic philosophy of German philosopher Georg Friedrich Hegel, Snellman was appointed lecturer at the University of Helsinki, where he belonged to the famous circle of culturally oriented Finns, Fredrik Sygneus, Elias Lönnroth, and Johan Ludwig Runeberg. Snellman's lectures quickly became popular with the students, but in November 1838 his lectureship was temporarily recalled after a judicial proceeding that ultimately aimed at establishing the government's firm control of new and oppositional thoughts among the academics. We have to remember that Russia was an autocracy where the Tsar or Emperor had complete power, and Finland, even though it was a Grand Duchy, definitely was no democracy back then. As a consequence, Snellman exiled himself to Sweden and Germany, more or less voluntarily, from 1839 to 1842. By the time he returned to Helsinki, his popularity had increased further, but the political juncture did not allow the University of Helsinki to employ him. Instead, he took up the position as headmaster for a secondary school, or for an upper secondary school, in the city of Kuopio in eastern Finland, almost 400 kilometers to the north of Helsinki, and published starkly polemical periodicals, including the newspaper Saima in Swedish, that advocated the duty of the educated classes to take up the language of Finnish, that was then spoken, according to some researchers, by about 85% of Finns, and develop Finnish into a language of the civilized world, useful for academic works, fine arts, statecraft, and nation building. He also published another newspaper called The Farmer's Friend, or Maamiehen ystävä in Finnish. The government suppressed Saima as a subversive newspaper in 1846. In 1848 and 1849, Snellman was again rebuffed when applying for the position as professor at Finland's University in Helsinki. After having contemplated a renewed exile in Sweden, this time possibly definitive, Snellman in 1850 gave up his position in Kuopio and moved to Helsinki, where he and his family lived under economically awkward conditions until the death of the reactionary Russian Emperor Nicholas I in 1855, when it again became possible for Snellman to publish periodical papers on political issues. In 1856 he was finally appointed professor, which was met with great satisfaction among politically interested Finns. His unparalleled popularity could not, however, remain. He was a generation older than the most active political opposition, and now a man of the government, or as it was then called, the Senate, who had the brightest expectations for Finland under the rule of the relatively reform-minded Emperor of Russia, Alexander II. The language strife in Finland between the Finland Swedes and the Finns, Finnish-speaking Finns, which he was the chief initiator of, contributed also to substantial opposition against him and his views, and finally, not the least, his stance against the Polish rebels of the January uprising of 1863. In 1863, Snellman was called to a cabinet post in the Senate of Finland, in effect as the finance minister, where he became an energetic and valued senator or minister, accomplishing a language decree from the emperor that gradually, after a transition period of 20 years, would give Finnish a position equal to that of Swedish within the Finnish government, and thereby practically in Finland at large. The re-establishment of the medieval-oriented diet of estates, the nobles, clergymen, burghers, and peasants, that had remained inhibited since 1809, and finally the introduction of a separate Finnish currency, the markka or the mark, in 1865, which remained Finland's currency until the introduction of the euro in Finland in January 2002. Snellman's tenure as finance minister would, however, also be tainted by the worst famine in Finnish history from 1867 to 1868, where, according to different calculations, between 8 and 14% of Finns died, aggravated by the government's strict fiscal policy. Snellman's inflexibility and high-profile position in the political debate would, however, together with his old reputation as a radical agitator of the 1830s and 1840s, accumulate too much resistance and aversion against his person and his policies. In 1868, he was forced to resign from the Senate or government. For his remaining life until 1881, he continued to participate in the political debate, and now ennobled, he belonged to the nobles or aristocrats' estate in the parliament. Snellman never lost sympathy or lost popularity among his Fennoman followers, but had become a highly divisive symbol in Finland's political landscape. Some prominent Finnish communist of the 20th century, perhaps Mrs. Hertta Kuusinen, even labeled him Finland's first communist. In 1842, Snellman published his foremost work, or most important work, Study of the State. Basically, study of the doctrine of government.